Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the channel.
Thanks for
A
having
lot,
me.
a lot is going on in the world. I want to remind the audience, though, before we begin, that in the description box, we do have the links to John's website. So please click the link. That will take you to his website. You can sign up for the periodical and a reading. We'll go over that later in the show, but there's a lot to cover in this episode. Please type in your questions in the chat or join our simulcast on X Spaces, and you can actually ask for the mic and you can ask your question live. So, with that,
One more thing I have to add. Um, it's the easiest thing in the world. I've trained myself finally to do it for all of my sources. I just do it, and it helps them so much, and it would help us if all of you who are coming in and all of you that will continue to come in, and when it's also in repeat, not live, you'll see me saying this too. Everybody, click the like button. If you want to support us, it's the simplest way. It costs you nothing. It just costs you a little movement of your fingers. And I finally trained myself to do that with everybody that I need and source. And so please do that for us because it will bring more attention to and more people. And I would say that this show, whether you're seeing this live or later in the week, this will be the most significant show that I have done with Paul in all these years because of what's about to potentially happen. So we are we are in this year have entered a 24-month period. A crossroads in human history will be the years 2026 and 2027. Things are going to happen in this period, and they're already happening. They're quickening like I've never seen before. We're going to start seeing um, things that we've only, in some places, hoped for and never thought it would be possible to see it actually happening, but equally, nightmares that we have hoped never to experience, like nuclear explosions, will we will cross that threshold in the next 24 months, if not in the next 24 hours. So I will be first. I will begin with some hope, and I want you to, with all the things I'm about to list to you, because I had to actually write them out. There's so many things. I don't want to miss any of them. And I'm also going to read a very important prophecy from my own master, Osho, that saw a lot of this coming back in 1983 for our times. The I want to first say that of all the times I've been having great premonitions of things coming, some of them you can read in my book, Nostradamus, uh, Premonitions of 911, which is all documenting about 3 or 4 of my most powerful life premonitory experiences with the future. One of them being 911, but seeing it coming since 1983. Um, is that I have felt, especially after the presidential election of 2024, I had felt a deep, deep dread that something that we were going to destroy ourselves, even deeper than what I felt as a child, my first premonition about the Cuban Missile Crisis when it was ongoing, when I was in my final 13 days of being a 6-year-old. It ended on my birthday, my 7th birthday, October 29th. 1955 was then, so I was just very young. But as I've said before on this show, it changed my little boy life, became a whole lot more grown up and aware of world events and really feeling empathically how close we came to destroying the civilization and leaving behind survivors that envy us who are dead. Now, I felt that dread that was all encompassing after the election because it was the last weeks of our earlier demented president, Joe Biden, who was actually very much, he wasn't actually giving the pen, the auto pen, without agreement. I found out that he was very much into not only not talking to the Russians during this proxy war he was fighting with NATO, using Ukraine as the punching bag, and provocateur of NATO's advance since 1990s, all the way up to the Russian border, which was a recipe for a third world war, which we've been in since 2022 February. We're about to enter in this February, at the end of it, the fourth anniversary and entering the fifth year of this war. What had been happening is that America was starting to, every time the Russians show restraint, these idiots that we have in our leadership misread that as weakness. I'm here to tell you that if Russians acted like we have acted, we'd all have been dead a long time ago, and the few of us left would be envying the dead. So this very dangerous and stupid group of leaders in Europe and in America are basically have bought their own propaganda. They are seeing a Russia that does not exist, and they are seeing it as weak, which it is not. And it is winning this war in a large way. Now, the danger is that when the illusions that they hold on to don't bear fruit and reality breaks down the door, like a T-34 Soviet tank broke down the door of many a German home in 1945, and with the crash of that door and the grinding of the tracks, realize that Goebbels and Hitler and all the the government of the Third Reich had been lying to them through propaganda about miracle weapons and how we will win the war in the end and all of that. And I see the same annals, the same idiotic repetition in the news of the West about this war. So those who read the Hogue Prophecy Report know that for years now, I have been predicting the danger of a Cuban Missile Crisis that is repeated in our times at exponentially more dangerous steps than the Cuban Missile Crisis ever had. I mean, basically, the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was only one shot in anger fired, a anti-jet missile from the Soviet battery in Cuba that killed the only man who was killed in combat during the Cuban Missile Crisis. A certain major who was flying, U.S. major who was flying a U-2 spy plane to continue to take pictures for the targeting package for the U.S. overwhelming strike that was going to come probably on my birthday if to soften up Cuba for a U.S. invasion and occupation. And by the way, we didn't, even though the 13 Days movie is a wonderful fictional version, mythical version of the 13 Days of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but what it kind of insinuated in the movie, I have to correct, is that we didn't know until the end of the Cold War officially actually in 1989 that Um, and even Castro and even Khrushchev didn't know this, but the Soviet forces there had Frog nuclear tactical nukes that were commanded by battalion commanders in some weird break in the very centralized Soviet officerial control of command and control. For some reason, these battalion commanders could launch nukes at the American fleet as it was coming to deposit its invasion force on the beaches of Cuba. And that would have started, well, we wouldn't be talking about this now, and and if we were fighting a war now, it would be sticks and stones as our weapons. So I was feeling all this, and I didn't know what to do with because I was a child. First, I thought it was something to do with my own personal life. The ego always personalizes every premonition first. And then if you relax deeper into it, you really, it's not about you, it's something bigger. If you have this empathic thing overcome you, and you don't look for it, you don't seek it, you don't do anything about it, it just comes. And so I was feeling that this, what I called the Ukrainian missile crisis, which it has already done, has jumped loops beyond the dangers that we suffered in 1962 October. We've already have, and the Russians have already told President Biden after his election, when he started moving a whole set of new HIMARS launchers, US built launchers, crewed by CIA crews, military version of CIA, it has a military branch, probably decked out in Ukrainian uniforms, but CIA people. In fact, they could have been a lot of the CIA had literally stripped down and rebuilt the intelligence services of Ukraine. So they were probably also CIA Ukrainian agents that were also manning these as well as American overseers. They were going around firing ATACMS ballistic missiles at Russian targets. And finally, the stoic and patient and mature Russians made it clear to them, Putin made it clear, he said, are you aware that you are at war with us now, America? Are you aware that the only way these missiles and so many other missiles you fired into ostensibly as Ukrainians, quote unquote, into Russia have been, if the Ukrainians even they're firing them, he's only pushing the button, and the telemetry of U.S. satellites and U.S. People in Ramstein and even some bunkers, some of them been dug up by Russian missiles, of U.S. brass officers, supporters are guiding because only the US can guide, and the British do similar things with the Storm Shadow missiles. These only can be targeted by the United States, or in the lesser sense, UK, United Kingdom. So the Russians were making a point very publicly that you're firing at us, not the Ukraine. You, Americans, are targeting us, two nuclear superpowers. They never would dare do that in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Khrushchev and Kennedy were never going to do that because they still believed in nuclear forces as deterrents from doing that. Because where do you go? Mutually assured destruction, i.e., MAD, MAD as its acronym. And people, when I was growing up, really felt that because the years back when people launched atomic weapons, which we are the only people that have done it, launched it on two Japanese cities, the last two standing. We had conventionally already defeated Japan, and they would have actually surrendered around the time that Berlin fell. They were already reaching out saying, we cry uncle, we're ready to end this war. Now that Germany's not here, we're alone fighting the world. We don't want to fight the world. We just have one request. we will unconditionally surrender on every point but this. Do not keep the emperor on his throne. That's it. If you can just say yes to that, we'll surrender now. Well, I think a rather nefarious desire amongst Truman and the president that's replaced the vice president replaced Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They wanted to try this new atomic weapon because they were already seeing the next war, the Cold War, and they wanted to make I think in some respects they just let this war go longer, kill a lot more Americans and Japanese and people because they wanted the bomb wasn't ready yet, and they wanted to make a demonstration. And so, because you wonder, well, the Japanese were defeated. Why do you hit them with an atomic bomb when they're really done and they're actually asking you, let's stop. We're ready. Unconditionally, except for the emperor, we're ready. And there mustn't have not been a problem with it because here's the thing that happened. When they were ready and they had the two bombs to test in the early August, on the 6th of August and the 9th, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, once they were tested, once Truman had, right after Hiroshima, at Potsdam in the post-war conferences in ruined Berlin, with Joseph Stalin, the generalissimo of the Soviet Union, the bomb went off and he came up to Uncle Joe and said, we just lit off a bomb that wipes out an entire city in a second. And it's a new super weapon, and we have it. Because he wanted to scare Stalin. He wanted to intimidate Stalin. And Stalin's puffing on his pipe and going, I mean, really? That's interesting. No, buzzkill, total buzzkill. Like, so what? Like you might have said, I just ate a new hamburger. Oh, that's nice. And Truman was really chest-fallen because he had built up this whole thing. He was going to scare Uncle Joe. Well, of course, Stalin had people on the Manhattan Project that were actually giving information about the atomic bombs. He probably knew more about Manhattan Project and Alamogordo than the poor new president did. So we are so beyond all of that now. We, when Biden was literally starting a Ukrainian missile crisis and it was coming to that red line, a line we never crossed in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, we crossed it, and the Russians said, "You've crossed it." Now, what they did, though, they didn't launch on us. They could have made a nuclear demonstration across Europe, taking out NATO bases, maybe take out Ramstein with all its generals, maybe take out Brussels, maybe NATO offices next to the EU. They could have, if they were idiots like us, they would have done that. But they have a love for life and a love for civilization that I think is deeper than our own. And they are grown-up people. They know you and I and our nation has never seen anything close to what the Russians lost or any nation lost in World War II. Imagine if you lost 27 million Americans in that war. You only lost 400,000. And most of that, and 149,000 of that was from exposure and accidents and friendly fire. They were losing that kind of number in a week. And they killed most of the casualties of the Third Reich were killed in the Russian conflict. In fact, without the Soviets coming from the East, we were a little sideshow. If it wasn't for that, um, there's even some theories showing that even if we never got into the European theater, that although Russians would have suffered dreadfully more casualties, they might have done it even without our Studebaker and Ford trucks helping to drive millions of soldiers to the Schwanpunks for the force of breaking the German line. Um, and people forget because they just don't want you to know. But unlike us, who had hardly a shell dropped on us, or maybe a fire balloon in Oregon, or maybe a couple shells that thumped into a Santa Barbara cow field from Japanese submarines, um, the Russians, under fire, invaded by 3 million men and thousands of tanks and planes, the greatest invasion in history in numbers and deadliness, under fire, uprooted and dragged over the Ural Mountains into Siberia and replaced them on new foundations. 600 massive factories. They literally, under fire, being strafed, they managed to move 600 factories into central Siberia, near Ekaterinburg and Chelyabinsk and Novosibirsk and other places, which are now sprawling cities. But they literally took most of their industrial base and put it there out of the range of German bombers. And and we're producing the same in a year or two. We're producing the same numbers of tanks, planes, sometimes outstripping our own industries, which were not being hit by a single pebble from Germany. So what I'm pointing out is these are formidable people. These are serious people. We should be serious in our behavior with them and sincere and not so cavalier to think that you could even win a nuclear war on the so-called weak Russians who are drunk and stupid and don't. I mean, why don't that's anti-Slavic, like being anti-Semitic. It's racist. It's not real. And if you follow that bunk, well, you're going to have a nasty surprise because if they have to launch, if we give them a reality that if this world that they're in, and Putin has said it, if you're out to annihilate us, our nation, then we don't feel this world is worth living without us. So you're coming with us. And if you listen to that, if you become sober and listen to that, and if your leaders become sober and listen to that, then we have a chance. Well, I will be getting to that. So what happened with Biden? Biden was eager, what had blocked all diplomatic communication for 3 years with the Russians. This is something we've never done in the Cold War, the last Cold War. Even at the worst times, even in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were talking and the Russians were talking with us. Biden cut all that off for years. In the years of this war, in the years where such things like CIA men launching stuff that if it got to and hit the Kremlin or something might just start with a nuclear confrontation, and there's no connection to the United States because they've cut it off. So that's very dangerous. Um, so what happened is I was feeling this dread that, oh my God, now that he's a lame duck president, he's going to really do something as lame as any human being has ever thought of doing. He's going to accidentally, on purpose, get into a Cuban Missile Crisis, a Ukrainian Missile Crisis that has already directly had U.S. Arms firing directly for years at the Russians. And they, in response, which they did a few days after the warning, the Russians who had been monitoring where all the HIMARS were and their crews, within 2 weeks, they destroyed every single HIMARS and all of its crews. They destroyed them. And then they said, you've seen what we did to your people. We can do it again. So just back off. Basically, this thing lingered, this dread lingered until the 20th of January, Inauguration Day, when Donald Trump, 4 years delayed his second term, swore to become president, and Joe Biden was rolled off the stage of history. Then it lifted because now they had not the power to create this, and the Russians had destroyed all their crews, so they couldn't launch any of these things anymore. Where the Cuban Missile Crisis could have seen thousands of dead Soviet soldiers and engineers and hundreds of missiles destroyed, Biden went down as seeing his missiles destroyed in the Ukrainian missile crisis. So I'm going to pull up my notes, so forgive me if my glasses reflect them. Might give a more leery mood to this unique show I'm doing, but I had to type out some things I want to talk about. Um, First off, there's a number of things going on in the world that in the last few days has got a lot of indications that a major strike on Iran is coming. Um, Paul and I were talking about. In fact, Paul, could you kind of reiterate what you said about what's going on in the markets?
Well, the oil markets, they're starting to go up. I mean, we have a little bit of a trend for oil in Brent and in WTI. Those are two different oil markets, and there's definitely a big move in natural gas. There's a big move in gold. There's this, and that's usually a stress indicator. The Bank of Japan intervened, and the yen is strengthening. It was trading at about 159 to the dollar. So the dollar at that time was strengthening relative to the yen, but the BOJ intervened, and now it's been trading at about 154, 155. There seems to be potentially a coordination between the BOJ and the Federal Reserve. So they're trying to stabilize the currency markets. So there seems to be something going on. I think we talked the previous episode on banks going to the window at the Federal Reserve for liquidity, for overnight liquidity.
Uh,
At the end of last year, at the very end of last year and the very beginning of this year, it seemed to be correlated to what was going on with Venezuela.
yeah.
So there's definitely something going on with the banks. There's definitely something going on with the currency market. You're seeing stress being built up in the gold market and in the energy markets. So, just by looking at it from a market point of view, I would not be surprised that we have some sort of military operations very soon here, in conjunction with the strike group from Asia, the USS Lincoln Strike Group, in position. So it could be any day.
And just interject that I haven't confirmed it yet, but I think everybody's forgotten that there's already another aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean. I'm not sure about that. I'll check. But some of my sources were saying that everybody's looking at the Lincoln, but basically the aircraft carrier that's off Israel could be also sending a strike in, and that some of the people I follow are saying that that could, because it's close to the supplies in Cyprus and other places, that could, even though it's the perfect situation to have a ongoing strike like we did to Iraq for a month, it's a minimum of 3 aircraft carriers. But then if you include IUD, I'm probably mispronouncing that. Apologies, so my Arab speaking people, but the major base that's in Qatar, they're getting ready. The other thing that's happening is, which is also quite unusual, is that all the main airline carriers of Europe are canceling all flights to the Middle East, to the entire Middle East. So that's big. Um, yes. So thanks, Paul.
I think it's the George Bush aircraft carrier that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it is George Bush. Yes, I think it's definitely near enough to where it could be just
Mm.
coming right up to the coast of Israel. Probably going to be doing duty of trying to fire missiles to try to knock down any of the Iranian missiles that may be coming. Of course, this brings me to another, what makes this so damn dangerous is Trump, what I've got to understand is, I mean, Trump is under tremendous pressure from Israel because he's basically bought and sold by Miriam Adelson and our Congress, almost every member of it, bipartisanly, take huge amounts of money from AIPAC, which is basically a front for Israel, trying to convert America first to Israel first. And a lot of Trump supporters, both young Democrats who voted against the Democrats and also the MAGA people forget that the people that actually got Trump into office were all the swing voting Democrats who said enough with Kamala Harris and all this and this woke stuff and all. And they voted. They took a chance with Trump. Now the uh, the problem here is that I've heard that Trump had said to Netanyahu. First, the backstory is the story is that the reason why Trump did a kind of showbiz demonstration over Fordo and all the nuclear places, and then declared victory and bombing, the with B bombers, B-2 bombers. Um, the reason that keeps coming more and more up is when Iran in June was Friday the 13th, when Iran was able to recover from the surprise attack and decapitation attempt, which failed. Well, it killed a lot of people, a lot of civilians too. They got their radars back online, and then they started, by the next day, they were throwing in missiles, which were still not their best missiles. They're just using all their junk missiles and literally exhausted the Iron Dome, the THAAD system, and also David's Sling. All in short, these are the names of air defense systems that are supposed to make an Iron Dome over Israel, which were completely exhausted in 12 days. And I don't think they filled them much because the big story here is, folks, now this is why the carriers could get very busy because we have mountains of bombs for our jets that they can use. But when it comes to missiles and defensive missiles and all that, we've exhausted, and Europe has completely exhausted its reserves of missiles. So if you've run out of conventional missiles, and keep this thought in your mind because I'm going to come back to it a few times here, everybody. When you've run out of conventional options, what option do you have left? When your president says to Netanyahu, who back in June called him up and said, if you don't come in and help us, we will launch nukes on Iran. So he came in. He's completely under the power of these people, this Zionist regime, which has murdered 1 million Palestinians and counting. Remember that number because you're going to find out that it's that much, if not more. Um, he said this time around, talking with Netanyahu when he came, he said, I want it clean and decisive. It has to be fast, clean, and decisive, this decapitation attempt or what you're going to try again. Now, certain things to think about here. This is not going to be a surprise. This time around, this Iran's just gone through their Pearl Harbor last year in June. And like we did, they woke up. The sleeping Iranian giant in the Middle East woke up, united, and now they've even survived a couple even more egregious fifth column attacks where these hooligans and people, a lot of Kurds and others who came in heavily armed by Mossad with 30 to 40,000 swift white radars to snuck into the country so that they could communicate and coordinate their acts of terror. I saw stuff. If you go on X and look at some of the stuff that happened, I mean, I saw these people, they were just on freeways in Iran just firing at anybody. And you can see this poor driver, he's not even looking at him, and suddenly there's three bullets in the window, and then he goes rolling off the freeway. And they were just, I watched them come in and just uh, run in and start destroying shops and beating people. And it was criminal. It was an invasion of terrorists. They burnt mosques, they burnt banks, they burnt businesses. Um, and then they'd run off, coordinated by SWIFT, to do something else. Well, the Iranians shut down their internet system, and with the help of the Russians, who know how to shut down SWIFT, they taught them how to do it. And the SWIFT went blacked out, and that was the end of this insurrection. Now you'll keep hearing the Westerns saying, "Oh, they're still doing more and more." No, no, it's been down for a couple of weeks now. And even though the Iranians promised not to execute the thousands of people that did this, well, we'll we'll see what if Trump is going to honor his side, because don't hit us with attack. We won't do this. Now it's clear that Trump's just lying again, and they're going to go in. I mean, Trump's a tool of the Zionists. He can't. He's not our president. He's the viceroy of the United States. He's the Zionist viceroy overseeing the United States of America with his viceroy Congress. Um, and that's reality. And it pains me because I'm half Jewish and have a lot of Jewish heritage, and I don't like this. But there it is. So decisive. You want to be decisive. Well, you did conventional, didn't work. You you tried to blow up the Ayatollah and actually wounded the president of Iran, Pezeshkian. Killed hundreds of scientists, killed a few hundred generals and officers, but they have a system where the gaps are plugged immediately. It's in depth, their command structure, so you didn't stop it. And then they responded, and I think made a mistake when they stopped bombing after 12 days. But I imagine they did it. It was a stop. That doesn't mean that because they've already been in this missile war with Israel. Israel's missile war against Iran started on April Fool's Day in I guess 2025. And this 12-day war they talk about, I call it the 12-day campaign in the bigger war that's been going on since April Fool's Day, 2025, as one of the campaigns of this Third World War. So the what options does either Iran or Trump have? You can't do anything that it didn't work before. This rinky-dink attack on Venezuela just to grab one guy, declare victory, lick your lips for another Nobel Peace Prize potential, and nothing has changed in Venezuela. The same government is there. The Maduro government is running. Nothing's changed, and it's just hanging there. So, I mean, if Trump is trying hard to be an international clown, he's doing a really good job of it. Even Millet is not with his saw, one of his best buddies in Mexico, one of his tells, one of his plants, is not as big as clown as this guy is. But he's a doomsday clown. That's that's not that's a tall comic performance to exert a laugh out of rather than tears and terror. But anyway, he is. Uh, so I'm looking at the Israelis. I'm looking at Trump. That both leaders don't have, as far as I see it, any other option of success really taking out Iran's command structure and political government unless he used nuclear bombs. Now, Israel had a little earthquake in the Negev desert a week or two ago, and it kind of unusual place for earthquakes, although Israel's with the Rift Valley of the Dead Sea is definitely a high earthquake zone, so can't rule that out. But it could have been a test, just to give a little nudge out there so maybe they're starting to test their nukes very near the nuclear power plant in Dimona that has been the mother of between 200 to 400 nuclear weapons. Probably a lot of them are Hiroshima size. I've heard that they even have nuclear suitcases, and that, when I researched it for my book, Nostradamus, The War with Iran, which I began writing in 2007 and published in, I think it was September of 2007. I've updated it a few times, and I'm now on the verge of seeing all that work, all those prophecies of Nostradamus, which were in the clear so much more than the others. Something Nostradamus doesn't do unless it's a really serious potential future detour or crossroads in our future. The crossroads are always captured by his prophecies. And the fact that he would obsess so much on Persia, the classical name of Iran, Iran means land of the Aryans. Um, it was, and that there would be a great fleet sunk in the Arabian Gulf, melted and sunk. He talked about the sons of Ishmael coming out and fighting an enemy from coming out of Carmania. Carmania is the 16th century name for the Iranian side of the Strait of Hormuz. And sounds like they were went out in their small boats and shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which would thus cut off 45% of all oil imports. Now, they've openly said this time, if you strike us again, America and Israel, we will go all the way. They've said we will hit and destroy all your bases. All those 50,000 men and women in uniform, Americans, are going to see missiles, cruise missiles, and other hypersonic missiles slamming into their bases across Iraq, across Kuwait, across Qatar, across Saudi Arabia, UAE. That's going to happen. So they're going to hit, the dome in Qatar and the big U.S. air base there. That dome was struck in the June attacks. There are only two domes, radar domes, one there and one in Kuwait. That if you strike those, you've blinded half the radars of the U.S. forces in the Middle East. So we have a situation where, by the way, Iranian missiles have already shown they can reach into the Eastern Mediterranean. So if the George W. Bush is there, um, they have missiles, hypersonic and ballistic, that can sink that too. So you're looking at 10,000 sailors, 5,000 apiece on two aircraft carriers that might be down in Davy Jones' locker. Added to that, thousands of others from the missile frigates and other places. You have, of the 50,000 people that are scattered in bases all around the Middle East, you're going to see a significant loss of U.S. lives. You may see in one day more people killed in this war than all 10 years of America's occupation of Iraq after our Bush, his son, decided to fight a war of aggression against a war of choice, a war of conquest, Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, to occupy Iraq and nation build it, even though the people of Iraq did not ask for it. You, this Wars of aggression used to be what we hung Hermann Goering for in the movie Nuremberg, the wars that where you made a choice to go in and violently take over another country was considered in international law to be worthy of hanging in the Nuremberg trials. The surviving Nazi leaders caught the choke on that one. This is the other thing that's so scary about our times. We've got a president that is at a certain cognitive level where he's literally saying, I don't need national or international law. My morality is higher than the law. My moral understanding. Now, that should have got him certifiably taken out of office by the 25th Amendment right there. But people who are around him who are not cognitively, medically declining are may have fresh brains, but they're mediocrities par excellence. And they're yes men and yes women. And they may have a stress test to happen soon because I don't see how this war that Trump and Netanyahu want to exert on and take out Iran. Because, well, that's by the way, the Israeli government is not for the Shah's dumb son, a real piece of becoming the new Shah of Iran, bringing back the Savak, which were even worse than the Nazi Gestapo in Iran. There's no way Iran's going to even tolerate that. But the other group that doesn't tolerate it happens to be the Israeli government. They say, no, we want to decapitate it and see Iran broken up like we did Syria. We want Syria on steroids. Break it up, destroy it. They're the last threat, perceived threat that they've created by behaving so badly in their own neighborhood. There's a classic thing going on here. It's kind of, I mean, Netanyahu reminds me of another famous gambler from the last World War. Adolf Hitler was one of the greatest gamblers. He knew the risk of what he was doing. He knew that if Germany didn't win the war, and he warned his generals before it started, if you don't do this fast and fanatically, all of you and me will be dead, and Germany will be a cratered lunar landscape, or we will win it all. All or nothing crapshoot. Well, Netanyahu has shown himself to be quite deft at following that same crazy crapshooting because he is, like Hitler, he's doing insane things. And normal people who are more clinically sane than him can't, just like with Hitler, they can't anticipate him doing what are just really bat doo-doo crazy things militarily. And so, for instance, give you an example. When Moscow almost was taken by Germany, Stalin and the Soviet forces had centered around a defensive battle because uh, a sane man would think, well, Hitler's going to try to take Moscow in this new spring summer campaign. But he didn't. He went south to Stalingrad. And that totally threw the Russians didn't have anything down there. So stuff like that, What eventually happens with people who use their own madness as a form of genius is that people kind of, after a while, get to know what you're doing. And by the time 1943 was around, everybody was on to Hitler's game, and Hitler could not adapt. He was too stubbornly Taurus Aries cusp to change his strategies and stay ahead of them. So, so the Netanyahu has gotten away, even I would say even more than Hitler got away with. I mean, he's managed to. It's quite remarkable, actually. Is a formidable madman with a method. He has managed to get away with the greatest genocide since the Holocaust, creating a whole new Holocaust and getting away with it. Um, and he's really close to pretty much, give him another year and there won't be any Palestinians left there, except for bones. And, he's managed to come really close to isolating Hezbollah in Lebanon. He broke the connection that Iran had with Hezbollah as its proxy on the northern Israeli border. He's defeated that. Netanyahu has managed to take down Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria and collapse it and even gain territory from it. I mean, I could see him in all these things being like Hitler, saying, well, I won this, I won that, I won this. And now his Soviet Union is Iran. I mean, Hitler had won all this stuff, and now the Big Apple, the biggest thing, the source of Judeo-Bolshevistic communism, which is what he saw them as part of the Jewish cabal to take over the world. It's all ridiculous, but he believed it, and now he was at the threshold, and so he talked himself into it. He said, all we have to do is kick the door down of the Soviet Union, the whole rotten edifice will fall down. He said that. Well, it looked like he was going to be right 8 months into Operation Barbarossa. But by the time the autumn came, and by the time his soldiers were freezing to death on the approaches of Moscow, and he had to fight now the greatest battle in history that few people talk about, the Battle of Moscow. He was starting to say, I fear I've lost the war, even years before it was clear that he had. And he even after that, he never wanted to look at snow. It always made him feel bad. When it was snowing in eastern Prussia at the Wolfschanze, he'd stay indoors and grumble along. So Netanyahu is in the same devil's bargain. He has gotten away by being shifty, tricky, mad in his moves. And he's now at the same place Hitler is, the same final deadly temptation. What can go wrong? I have been winning. We've been fighting France in World War I, lost 3 million people on the Western Front, and I only lost 60,000 dead. And I did it in 6 weeks. We took Paris. So you can see how his head was getting enormous by his successes. He was a gambler. It was the crapshoot's working. I'm not coming up snake eyes. Not. And then Moscow happened. Big snake eyes. Okay, I'll try Stalingrad. I'm almost getting there with this. Lost the Sixth Army and a whole bunch of Allied Axis armies. And so, okay. Well, we'll just build up and we'll go after the Kursk salient in 1943. We'll build all these Panther tanks. We'll out tank them. We'll outdo him. And he only penetrated about 30, 40 miles on each pincer before he had to quit because the Allies in the West were invading Sicily and soon to invade Italy in 43. And that's when it all unraveled. It took a while, but that's when it started. Netanyahu is not going to have the luxury of a slow burn to Berlin. He's looking at Iran, and in a way, it's the way he set up his mad campaign. It's an all or nothing thing. If he doesn't win this, he's going to be in jail if he's lucky enough to still be standing and his nation still be standing. He's so the temptation for either launching nukes when it starts to all get blown up again, or start this thing with a nuclear strike on Iran, taking out Tehran, taking out Qom, taking out all the places and dropping nukes on some of the cave constructions around those areas where the government might hide. I don't see how Trump or Netanyahu can succeed in Iran unless they start, since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, an atomic surprise attack on Iran. And I'm not alone. And I hate it because a lot of my more sober sources, really good and accurate, I hate hearing them say the same thing. Because oh shit, if if Alexander Mercouris is saying it, if Daniel Davis is saying it, and some others, Scott Ritter and all these people, I'm going, oh man, we're in trouble now. So I I think it's possible, and because things are gathering, I hope I'm wrong, but uh, I think if Trump goes in and if they don't strike first with nukes, they think that that's going to, for some, they've talked themselves into thinking that that's going to end the missiles flying on Israel. It's ironic. One of the Trump's first outrages early um, in his administration was that he assassinated Qasem Soleimani, who was the general that defeated ISIS using Iranian and Iraqi forces that died by several tens of thousands to liberate most of Iraq and Syria from ISIS, who has now, by the way, been let loose. All the people, the new ISIS commander that's running Syria as its commander, Jolani, he freed tens of thousands of Syrian soldiers last week. So now they're out of prison. They're back in their uniforms. I wonder what they're going to do next. Maybe a war in Lebanon, maybe a complete destruction of Lebanon. Who knows? They'll have to get through um, Hezbollah. And the Israelis might have Hezbollah in a corner, but they don't dare go too deep into that because Hezbollah has been decimating their soldiers, and they're not a large population to have such things being done. So that's another factor. Limited conventional weapons, limited conventional weapons to stop this next avalanche of missiles. But the problem is, Qasem Soleimani was the man who devised the plan to scatter all the missile factories and missile silos and missile launch holes across a vast mountainous country, 4 times larger than Iraq. And we couldn't find the Scuds in that flat desert where there was nothing other than desert. And if anything was running around like a Scud, we would have seen it. Couldn't even find the Scuds in the Gulf War. Um, what do you think? I have flown over from the 80s and through till 2001. I have flown over the vast expanse of Persia, Iran. And it is, if you look down there from 35,000 feet night and day, you're seeing a place that there's no way you're going to find everything and bomb it. It's vast. It's like the Sierra Nevada mountain range being the size of the Rocky Mountains. It's all across the country. And so they can turn Tehran into ash, maybe Isfahan, maybe Natanz, Maybe other places they can turn to nuclear ash and kill millions of Iranians. And do you think in a culture of martyrdom as Shia, constantly martyred by the Muslim majority and all, do you think they're going to stop and reflect? Do you think they're going to stop and go, okay, we cry uncle? No. They're going to launch on you and with their conventional weapons until there's nothing of you in the Middle East left, whether you're American soldiers or you are uh, Israeli soldiers or Israeli citizens. I mean, the thing that could happen, some of the scenarios that could happen are quite chilling. I don't think because I understand Islam more than most Western people do, and it would be kufir, it would be blasphemous, haram, for the Iranians to actually cause a nuclear meltdown of Dimona nuclear reactor. I don't think they'll do that because that's just haram. It's not human. They don't even want to have atomic bombs because it's haram. It's blasphemy. And it is. It's a blasphemous weapon. It doesn't just kill things, it leaves a pall of plague for centuries. Terrible plague of radiation sickness. Who would make such monstrous things? Because you will be polluted as well as your enemy. It's mutually assured destruction. What could be more satanic than that? But in fatwa law, if you build them as deterrents, knowing that they are evil, but you're saying okay because if your enemy is building them and could use them, your deterrent is to have them too. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had some. I don't know though. The the basically what could happen, even I'll tell you this for sure, if Dimona is not struck, all of its transmission lines and power uh, stations that give Israel electricity will be utterly destroyed. Dimona will be still there. It will not melt down. Because if it were, the you would have a Chernobyl situation in the Middle East. And it now by accident it may happen. I don't know. Things happen in war. But if it happened, that would cause a nuclear radioactive cloud that because the winds are usually from the south to the north, which would spread that cloud across the entire length and breadth of Israel, making it uninhabitable. For, get this coincidence, Paul, probably 270 to 200, 300 years. That kind of, if you folks remember some of our talks about the window of a more peaceful, God-granted, God-blessed return of his people to the land of Palestine, and for the third temple either to come down onto the mount or be in your heart, as a lot of Torah rabbis and Torah worshippers of Judaism, including myself, are into. Um, so this, but even without this happening, God forbid, the conventional devastation will be so massive that the people that survive it, most will, Israel has good bunkers, they won't have water, they won't have food, they won't have electricity, and they will be refugees from a devastated country at a time where a whole lot of the world is not going to accept them as refugees because they see them as mass murderers in this Holocaust, which 80% of the polls still show 80% of the people living in Israel are all for it. Get rid of those Palestinians. Final solution for the Palestinians. And I'm shocked to see, but all around the world, for instance, in Thailand, Thailand's no longer accepting Israeli tourists. They talk about how they're so overbearing and demanding, they're doing crimes and stuff like that. And so Thailand pretty much put a moratorium on Israeli citizens coming to Thailand. This is what I hear and see some of it happening. So in Asia, a lot of people are saying, no, we don't want to have Israeli tourists come here. They're nasty, they're arrogant, and feel entitled and treat us like little gooks, you know. And so, a lot of racism going on here. So I want the only nation that's going to let the surviving Israelis come live in it is the United States. Otherwise, I think most of the world will not want them. This is how bad it's gotten. Uh, I I've been saying since I've looked at these, when the U.S. Embassy in Trump's administration was moved to Jerusalem, I did a chart on its birth when it was opened and did a composite chart on the Israeli Jewish state's birth chart. And it was catastrophic in some of that it was a move, and I wrote about it back then, that would lead to the end of the Jewish state in the Middle East, because it would then trigger in the chart all these squares and oppositions, which are basically what is wrong about this first return of the chosen people since 1948, who returned as Zionists, which are basically Jewish fascists with their racial policies similar to the Nazi fascists against Semitic peoples. Nazis were anti-Semitic because they were murdering the Semitic Jews. Now Jews, Semites, are murdering their own cousin brothers and sisters of Abraham, who are Semitic. They are Semites. When people say, you're an anti-Semite for saying that, well, what are you if you're murdering these people? I'm just having an opinion. You've killed 1 million of your cousin brothers and sisters. Time to pause and reflect. And so all of this is coming down. It's this bad karma. It's this toxic situation where the way you unite the people staying in Israel is through creating enmity with all your neighbors, so that and even Moshe Dayan, who is least honest about it, very eloquently described it when he said, look, these people, he openly said, we came in here, we raped their women, we destroyed their 700 villages, we took their ancient lands, and they hate us. So, therefore, you must unite and be a warrior tribe, a warrior nation. And so he basically is saying we have to live by the sword, even though Isaiah said you can perish by the sword. And that, unfortunately, is what's transpiring. Jews will come back to Israel in the future if all this stuff that I'm talking about happens. But it's going to be according to the way the prophecies work. It's not an enforced uh, invasion. It's a welcoming. And when they come back, so many Jews were coming at the turn of the last century, and and the Arabs and the Palestinians were helping them set up find where water is. They were good neighbors. And I believe this will happen again, that Israelis will come back, and this time around, they won't be murderers and rapists and genocidal. They will be living with their cousin brothers and sisters in peace, and they will return. And whatever happens to the temple will then happen in its own accord, not in your ego's desires. And so I see that happening, but we've talked about this theme, Paul, before, that we may be seeing in the next hours, days, weeks, months, or year, 2 years, a second diaspora, time to come back, reflect, and wait for the Lord to give you indications, not your atheistic Jewish Zionists who are not practicers of Judaism. They've even said, some of their greatest leaders said, it's not about God. It's not about religion. It's about the land. That's everything. So they don't. They just do that to go through the motions. They're not spiritual Jews. Um, the spiritual Jews and the vast majority of Jews are with me on this. And there's amazing guys I've been watching, amazing rabbis, one in New York and all, who really explain the whole situation beautifully. Um, and I'm with them. My Jewish heritage is with them, not with these Zionists. So, so things to look at here in my list. It's possible we may see if Trump actually says, well, we'll use nuclear weapons against Iran if they're losing this thing. If he's pressured by his Israeli handlers to do that, we may see a situation where he has to stand before Congress and deal with the 25th Amendment. It'll be all depending on whether, some people in his cabinet who are not the yes men, like Tulsi Gabbard and some other people, and possibly the vice president, although I'm not sure anymore, um, that they say, no, Mr. President, you can't do that. You cannot launch nuclear weapons. And he says, well, I order you to. He says, we're not going to follow it. And then maybe they'll take the next step and say, I think we ought to give you a cognitive test and see if you are actually capable of being president of the United States. I think he cannot last his 3 years. He's going so fast. It often happens with very powerful men who kind of thrive on stress. As he has often said, I thrive on stress. Well, the downside is when you're in your early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, um, it'll it'll thrive on you in a different way with a rapid decline of physical health, of mental health. And so we're facing that. The other thing is that all of you think this is going to be far away from your lives, wherever you're listening to me, if you're not in the Middle East. If the Strait of Hormuz is closed, and if the oil refineries and infrastructure of the Middle East is destroyed, you're going to be in a whole different world when it comes to being able to drive and fly and do a lot of things. The other thing that's happening is this will be a huge shock to the global economy, especially the West. Not so much China, not so much Russia, not so much the BRICS nations. So that's another thing that's going on. The other thing too is that if America actually does what it did before, but in a worldwide watching, launch nuclear weapons, we're the only people that have done it. And if they and the Israelis do it, the whole world, if you think people are moving away from the dollar, moving away from US bonds, you got a surprise coming. You could see in a year all the things that support our US dollar by making people use it, by sanctioning them if they don't, by us making it toxic. You're not hearing this information on CNN or Fox. You should expand out to some of my sources. If you're a member of my Hogue Prophecy Report, you'll have all the links, and then you'll have their links, and then you'll have their links. I use my work also as a doorway to a real set of newsmakers and news chroniclers. So I contend. Don't have an opinion for or against it. Try it out. See how much of what I'm saying is BS or not. So by becoming a member of the Hope Prophecy Report, a subscriber, then you'll know. I have all my sources, you'll know. And what's happening and what I've been reporting on is that there's nobody's running for U.S. U.S. What do they call them? The bonds or things of that because we're going to see that run out. What that means is that the United States economy in this year probably by autumn, is not going to have the bonds, long-term bonds, basically depositing our excess debt on our customers because they won't be using the dollar. It's looking like my prediction is happening, that the yuan is going to become a kind of alternative, not a global currency. The Chinese are smart enough not to do that because there's a burden that comes with being the global currency. Well, they're going to do something that's kind of in between that. Uh, what's happening is Russians buy Chinese products with yuan, and there's a new system that BRICS is coming together, and this one will really be better than SWIFT, the one we use in the West, and it'll pretty much use yuan as a conduit. Your national currency converted to yuan, which the Russians and the Chinese will use to give oil and food and products. Russia's the breadbasket of the world as well. Um, and so, so I don't think
It's interesting that you're bringing this up, John, because
Mhm.
today in Asia, there's actually a financial conference that's taking place. And one of the representatives for Japan's banking industry, central banking industry, did mention about these new facilities that they're starting to create where their trading partners, they're reaching out with other trading partners to use their currency.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's a simple thing, but it took a long time for people to realize, and circumstances had to happen, and certainly large superpowers that were more benevolent about this rather than usury about this, Russia and China. You know, China just wants to trade and make business, doesn't want to make war. Russia doesn't want to make war. God knows, if anybody knows what war is about, it's Russians. They're constantly being invaded by Europeans for 800 years. And now you're in the last act of that, and it's crashing. I mean, that's the other thing that's happening. The war in Ukraine is accelerating, so there's another potential panic situation where as things collapse this year, and then what's Europe going to do? And what I'll tell you what they may do. This is kind of a shocking twist, but I've been writing about it since 2014, documented these views. I've always felt that the future of Germany, the final karmic healing of Germany and Europe in general, will be when they invest in Russian factories employing Russian workers and actually turn east with the Nord Stream pipeline 1. I think it's still functional. I really see if Trump uses nukes or goes into this ruinous war in the Middle East, which upends the economy, I think it will happen that the Europeans will look east and they will turn their backs on the United States because the United States is turning its back on you. When the United States sooner or later is going to drop NATO like a bad habit, it will then pull 76% of all the resources financially that makes NATO survive, which means none of the European NATO members, when America backs away, can keep NATO going a day after. So there's two choices. You either fool yourself into think that you can fight a war when you've exhausted everything and your industries can't produce what Hitler could produce because they're basically gone. You've let them go to seed. You've shut off your nuclear reactors. You're closing down Volkswagen. You are and Siemens, and that is the heart. The German Reich is the Bundes money is the backbone of the euro. So your euro is going to go down. So make love and vacation, not war, Europe. Become at least for now the place where everybody in the global South, China and Russia want to go to vacation because of your lovely palaces and beaches and all that. You don't have any natural resources, so you might as well use your vacation resource to keep your countries going. But you won't have anybody protecting you from Russia, and maybe then you'll recognize that you don't have to worry about Russia. They have never invaded you. You invade them for 800 years. They don't want to invade you. They've got 11 time zones. It's like it's like 12, 14% of the Earth's surface. They don't need more land. There's only 150 million of them. What are they going to do with all you 500 million fools? They're not going to conquer you. This is just so silly. And maybe it will take, and I'll finish with this on a good note. Maybe it will take this shock to wake you Europeans up and dump those idiots that in the next year or two out of office. Close the EU because that is a technocratic dictatorship. Once you gave them the power, they rule over you like dictators. Shut it down. It's really ripe time, and the astrology is in favor of it, of a second French Revolution, which spread across all of Europe. It can be peaceful, but you gotta take these people out of power and wake up, start becoming mature again, stop lolling and let other people run your scene. I mean, Europe has become so weak. It's not a good, healthy thing when you had an overbearing parent like the United States, because in all these years, you've lost your spine, you've lost your individuality as nations. Grow a spine again. Wave bye-bye to the United States and NATO and the EU. Find different ways and turn east because your destiny is east. I've started saying that in 2014 before all this happened. And now it's clearer to me now than ever. The other thing too is that despite the fact that the dread disappeared in the end of Biden's administration, and despite the fact that it looks like we're really going to see some fireworks, really scary stuff, I don't have that dread in the pit of my being. I don't know why I don't have it, but it's not there anymore. It's almost like these next 2 years now it could change any moment, but I'm saying I'm rather surprised. With the stuff that's going on now, and I'm not in denial. It's not there. It's the Cuban Missile Crisis, not in my gut at 6. It's not there. So I'm wondering if what happened at the end of Trump's administration, that Ukrainian missile crisis, for some mysterious reason, has ended the danger. But we are going to be scared a lot in the next 2 years, and it's good. Scared straight. It's almost like the guy who could have hit the guy with his first punch wasted it, and now the fight's even louder and the threats are higher, but he's just not going to win the thing. I bring back this idea, this very mystical idea, that evil and discord and stuff have their alchemical purposes for us if we live the art of living in the right way. There's nothing wrong with being scared if it wakes you up. There's nothing wrong with it. If all this stuff is about to explode in the Middle East and it's going to upend everything, you may all wake up. You will be alert. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the seed of fear that planted the Enlightenment that eventually, over the next few decades, ended the Cold War, made people aware. In fact, we were in more greater threat in the late 80s than ever we were in that time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We had 72,000 nukes on the planet. We could destroy the planet 20 times over. They were piled up everywhere, and mostly the Soviet Union, United States. And at the same time, as Scott Ritter was out there in Russia dismantling them, we had created intermediate missiles like we are doing now by breaking the INF treaty. Trump did, America did, just walked away from it. And now Russia said, well, okay, then we won't create intermediate range missiles that could be nuclear tipped and place them in the European arena if you do not send the same. And so we will put a moratorium. They're doing the same thing about the START treaty, the new START treaty. We will not add MIRVed warheads to our 1,600 delivery systems if you don't. But if you do, we'll add them. So for 3 years or so, this was going. Now the United States is putting intermediate range atomic tip missiles in Denmark, and they're adding more. And so we're back to 1987 when we were really more close to blowing everything up then. So my point being here is we're really closer than that time, just the same. But it's like it's a fight that's may not happen except for all the shouting and threatening. It's possible. And we're going to even see these people, these idiots, try to take us over the edge many times. Not the Russians, not the Chinese, not the global majority. Most of the world is out of this insanity, but we of the West are having a hard time letting go of 500 years of colonial dominance and social economic dominance. It's over for that. It's moving back to Eurasia and the South. And we can be a part of that in a peaceful way and have a significant contribution to make, but forget the hegemon. Dump the hegemon. And so uh I will keep you in touch if my gut starts to get a different message. But I'm kind of shocked and surprised that as we are now really coming to some very significant upheavals, historic and life-changing for the human race, all of us, I would think that I would be on the floor with this gut thing driving me crazy, like I was before 9/11, like I was when I was 6 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm definitely feeling the aggression and the threats. It's almost like some bullywimp who's making all the moves. This happened to me once as a kid. He's making all the moves. I'm going to get you. I'm going to beat you. And all I did was step forward one step, and he ran off like a chicken, like a chicken bird going. Bah, bah, bah. It's maybe it's over. Maybe we're going to see just a whole lot of. Well, I'm going to see some nukes. You're going to see some nukes that are dropped. I definitely feel that. And you know what? That could really be good because that could scare you, me, and our leaders straight. And then that changes things. And then this will be a much bigger scare than the Cuban Missile Crisis ever was. And it will be ongoing for 2 years. It'll infect our DNA. It will make us more alert. It will make us more suspicious of all these warmongers and hegemoners and people like that. So I'm strangely hopeful, even though we're about to see the doo-doo hit the fan in a major way any moment now in the Middle East. Now, we'll see what happens in the Middle East and see if that changes. And since I'm up on this show every 2 weeks, I will give you a gut check for the next 24 months. If we're still doing this that long, which I hope we are. So I'm going to end now with reading, and then we could do questions. I hope there's a lot of people waiting. But I want to read to you what my master said in March of 1983. It was just out of the blue because he wasn't publicly speaking for years. but he left this communique. I was on the Oregon Commune at that time. I was digging a post hole for a sign, and then I found out about this and then read it. And then I looked down that hole. And the next thing I did, I only had one book that I saved from my 2,500 book library when I dumped all that, sold it off to go live on the ranch. And I didn't understand why. I had this little dog-eared black book with a lot of black electrician's tape keeping it together. I still have it. After I heard about this and heard him say this, I went back to my pup tent on top of a mountain and I opened my locker and I took out that book. It was Erica Cheatham's book on Nostradamus's prophecies. It's the only book I saved. And there began my journey, my sadhana with prophecy and Nostradamus. This is the words that began it all in March of 1983. Osho says, "Man is now living in the most critical moment, and it is a crisis of immense dimensions. Either he will die or a new man will be reborn. It is going to be a death and resurrection. Unless human consciousness changes totally, man cannot survive. As he is right now, he is already outdated. During this period, there will be every kind of destruction on Earth, including natural catastrophes and man-manufactured auto-suicidal efforts. In other words, there will be floods which have never been known since the time of Noah, along with earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and everything else that is possible through nature. The Earth cannot tolerate this type of mankind any longer. There will be wars, which are bound to end in nuclear explosions. Hence, no ordinary Noah's Ark is going to save humanity. The Holocaust is not going to be confined to certain places. It is going to be global. So no escape will be possible. You can only escape within. And that's what I teach. I do not teach worship of God or any other ritual, but only a scientific way of coming to your innermost core. And that's what I do with my readings. Often what happens in my readings, which is I do on Zoom, which is also linked on this Paul's website here in the show. My other work, which is not so well known, is to share these remarkable meditations of Osho, which are really tailored for the needs of a world that is mind amplified, too mind amplified. They're fun, they're playful, and they absolutely are capable of stirring a spiritual revolution inside you. And so my readings often come to my sadhana as a meditator. Osho gave me the name in Sanskrit, Swami Dhyan Arjuna. That means Master of Meditation's Innocence. Master of Meditation's Innocence. And that's also what I share in these readings. So, sign up and we can have a one-on-one, just like I'm having with all of you at once. So, again, the beauty of us reaching this Noah's Ark situation is that going to the center of your witnessing consciousness is the thing that could do more to literally change the course of history by doing nothing, but being, loving, just here, just now. The consciousness is like a candle in a universe of darkness. The darkness of the whole universe cannot put it out. Consciousness is like a light that cannot be put out. And all that's needed, according to mystics like Osho and Gurdjieff and others, their hypothesis is that all is needed is another 200 people who have their candle lit, which they have been born with, which they came with. It's already lit. You've just forgotten it because of the programming process that every child goes through. Well meant by our mothers, fathers, priests, politicians, and pedagogues. They mean well, but they've lost the thread because it was also done to them. This breaking of the thread through conditioning, if it can be broken, the human race has a great future, multi-galactical future before it. And we can make this earth a paradise. It's very simple. We just have to reconnect with the gift that we brought into this world, the gift that every child has, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness. It is coming in the package of every child, and it is not lost, just coated over by ego and programming, which can be witnessed and then it will fall away on its own accord. So consciousness has a quantity, consciousness has a quality. Consciousness has a quality that can counter all the darkness that's descending on this world right now. That darkness cannot put out the candle of at least 200 more than the average of us becoming fully lit. And even if you're not fully lit, if you are doing the meditations and living in the world through that without being of the world, totally engaged, no escapism here in these kind of meditations. Just your love, just your awareness, just these things, these simple, ubiquitous, ordinary things, which are so extraordinary in their ordinariness. That's why they're missed. You can change the alchemy of the situation that's happening on this planet. And so that's what I teach in my readings. So if you resonate with this, please go to my website, hogueprophecy.com, HOGUEPROPHECY.com, and you'll see the links about getting a reading from me right at the top of the website, and sign up. And we'll set up the time. If you sign up, you'll put Hogue reading in the subject line. It's all you need to do. I'll find it in all the thousands of emails I get every day, and I will contact you and give you the available times, and we'll set it up, tell you how to pay for it online and all of that. And then we'll have a reading that sometimes can last 2 to 3 hours. We go deep, but playfully so. So, thank you everybody for listening to this important message. And now, is there anybody thank you for patiently waiting if you've been waiting. Does anybody have a question or a
We
comment?
have quite a few listeners that are from Canada today.
Ah,
So,
remember what I said last time about Alberta and all of that, and about that, yes.
yeah, maybe you want to repeat that because we did have a question about Alberta. There was a question earlier in the show here
Well,
about
the question
Alberta
that,
and
yeah,
their referendum.
yes. Well, I when I said that, I didn't know they were having a referendum. I was like, and a day or two after, I went, oh my God, Alberta's really thinking about it because it just vibed it. I thought that's how it works in this. Um, I don't really do anything. I just allow. But anyway, yes, the question that had come up 2 weeks ago from Kent, who's also from Canada. Hello, Kent, if you're out there. He did a reading recently. Got a reading. Um, it came up about Greenland, and what also came up was the potential future of a breakup of the United States into more sovereign states rather than a national centered, the United States returning to our rather than is. It's a community of sovereign states. And then we got on to the subject with Kent's question about how would Canada break up? Would Canada break up? And I said, yeah, there's a potential of that. And then without knowing what was going on, I mean, there's a precedent because I did talk about it 2 weeks ago about how all the Western provinces have molded this idea off and on from the whole existence of Canada, especially since Ontario seems to dictate in a way that really feels for a lot of Western Canadians that they're not, people in Ottawa are not really listening to them. And I don't think having a lot of truckers imprisoned in very fascist ways has done help to keep the Canadian Union alive. I will just add that. With Miss England, who used to be the prime minister, who is married, well, bit National Socialist. So, yeah,
Well, she resurrected herself at at Davos.
yeah. Well, go figure. You
It,
know,
because she was kicked out or stepped,
yeah.
she resigned or whatever.
Well, she had to go back because she's
Yeah,
got kind of kicked out in Canada.
but she's trying to almost like redefine herself.
Well,
I
yeah,
never
she's.
liked her. I actually met her.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this was during the INET days with INET used to INET is an organization through Soros that was like,
Ah,
for economics. So it's like new thinking. It was like a new thinking economic forum. And she would usually MC some of the actual panels.
mm.
It was kind of like a mini Davos kind of
Yeah,
thing,
she does a
Soros
lot.
version of it. And at the time, I think she was working for Reuters,
Uh,
or it was either Reuters or FT or something.
USAID used to give those guys billions every year.
So,
I wonder why I don't read them much anymore.
but she's trying to position herself as a consultant or position
Yeah,
herself as an analyst,
yeah.
financial analyst. I don't like her because she used economic warfare against the truckers.
Yes.
She froze the accounts.
They absolutely froze their accounts, destroyed them, took their and then
Dangerous.
the actual acting prime minister was hiding away pretending he had COVID. And he's the son of Fidel Castro, illegitimate. And you can see he looks so much like his father. And it isn't his father.
Trudeau.
Pierre Trudeau. Yeah, yeah. No, it's a whole story. I mean, it's all documented. It's all admitted. Pierre Trudeau's wife had an affair with Pierre in Cuba, not together, but it went on while he was there in Cuba doing diplomacy for increasing Canada's economic influence in Cuba. And when all that was happening, and you can see the pictures of them. I mean, you know what it is when people are attracted. It's like you really, I mean, you see his wife and Fidel, and they were like, oh boy, they've already done the deed, maybe more than once. So, and then she got pregnant with uh, with the former prime minister. She was really the power behind him, and she was the one responsible for all that rather national socialistic repression of the truckers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
There's a
I
direct
that's when she got
there's
on my radar because I was saying, why is she, this is absolutely fascist what she's doing. And I was thinking Canada was a place, I love Canada. I thought maybe if I get too politically incorrect in the United States, I can always go to Canada. Now I go, nope.
yeah.
I thought I'd never say it. I'm actually safer here than there.
Well, the thing
And Europe too. I don't think I can go back to Europe
with
or
Freeland
England.
or with Freeland, she heavily is connected with Soros. Heavily.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, there it is.
he's connected to, this almost like destroy the world
Yeah,
Dr.
depopulated.
No kind of guy,
Looks like we need
respond.
another Holocaust.
She's dangerous. She's absolutely dangerous.
Yeah,
And she seemed to be
she
on
doesn't
certain
like us.
substances when she was,
We're just
when,
meat to her, you know.
yeah. Well, and then, over at Davos, it was interesting with Carney, who's now the prime minister. But Carney, it's like he's he's aligning himself with China now with trade deals, which
Pretty
is
bold
obviously
move.
going to upset Trump. So there's going to be more tariff. I mean, just recently, Trump said that if you align yourself with China,
Yeah.
then we're going to slap on 100% tariff.
He's even
You know,
starting to call him the governor of the 51st state again. So
yeah.
that's coming up again.
And then you have you have the Supreme Court that's going to have their say on tariffs. So it's going to
I hope they
cause
do their job.
So, but let's just say that let's just say that the Supreme Court says the way that Trump is using tariffs right now is illegal.
It
Well,
is.
then the markets are going to go into free fall,
Yep.
and then Trump's administration is going to come up with some other means to slap tariffs. Will create more free fall in unknown in the
He is a
market.
president that does not follow the laws of the land or the United Nations, which we signed on to, which means the UN laws are our laws. And he's a lawless president. I mean, I've never seen it before. He literally is said, my morality is higher than the Constitution and the laws of the nation of the world. That's crazy.
See, I always put when I look at leaders, especially in the United States, the litmus test that I use is if they were in the situation of George Washington, would they have given up the generalship, become a private citizen, and run as the president of the United States, or would they have anointed themselves as a king? And I did vote for Trump 3 times. But the thing is that Trump has the personality
Yep.
that is antithetical to George Washington in many,
Yeah. Yeah.
and because of that, Trump would have anointed himself king.
Well, I mean, he wants to be king of what I call BOP, his his an acronym for what the something of the Bureau of Peace or something like that, whatever he's calling it.
Oh, the
I
Board
mean,
of Peace, the
Board
Board
of Peace. I call it BOP.
yeah, the Board of Peace.
BOP. And I it's and he's you can stay in the club if you give me $1 billion. And he'll probably run that after if in his hospital gown with a bedpan after his presidency is over. But I don't think he's anyway about England. That England's family married into Ukrainian nationalists who were in Canada as refugees of, well, basically being allies with the Nazis and losing with the Nazis. Thousands of them were in the Galicia division, which was the completely Ukrainian SS Grenadier Panzer Division. I mean, they were the fastest, most fanatic non-German allies the Germans ever had. They even got the whole division with all the equipment, everything. And the survivors of that group ended up surrendering in Italy so they wouldn't be caught by Stalin. And then they ended up in Britain for a while, and then they ended up all around Ontario area, but especially around Toronto. And though she was not a part of those, her grandfather, her Ukrainian on the Ukrainian side of her family, her grandfather used to write Ukrainian National Socialist magazines and stuff for Ukrainian Nazis, Banderite Nazis in Goebbels' propaganda ministry. And I was told about before when I started actually exposing the Nazi problem that Ukraine had way back in 2014, when not a lot of people knew about it, and how the American Obama administration actually funded and oversaw the coup that took the democratically elected Yanukovych out of office and put the who's who of Ukrainian Nazism in power. And the first thing they did was to say Russians are basically subhuman Slavs and they can't speak their language anymore in our country. And basically they wanted them flush them out and take all their mines because all the real industry in Ukraine is in Donbass. And they were mostly run by Russian-speaking Ukrainians who were fine being Ukrainians when it happened in 1991. But they were so shocked that when this all changed, when the fascists came in, they were basically told, we don't want you anymore. And you either convert, they even suppressed the Russian Orthodox Church and imprisoned all the priests and nuns. They took down all opposition parties and put the party leaders and their cabinets in prison. I mean, if this isn't fascism, I don't know what is, because they were following the Hitler book, chapter and verse. Bergen-Belsen was the first concentration camp and mostly had people who were speaking out, journalists, democratic Germans, all were thrown in that and conditioned to be frightened and, well, if they didn't get killed. So anyway, um, I went, okay. I've heard that Janet Eaglin used to go to Ukrainian national kind of Boy Scout, Girl Scout, like Hitler Youth, and that she would sometimes dress up in the Ukrainian outfit and do the Roman salute, as it's actually called, so that YouTube doesn't get excited. It's and so she was like a Hitler Jugend of the Banderite fascists outside of Toronto for a time when she was growing up. So, you know, there was that huge mistake that happened during her run with the prime minister, where they had Zelensky from Ukraine present there, and they said, and suddenly the Speaker of the Parliament in Ottawa is saying, "We actually have a Ukrainian World War veteran who fought. He fought in the World War II, and he fought against the Russians." And everybody goes, "Oh, oh." And a few smart people were kind of thinking, well, we didn't fight against the Russians, and British didn't fight against the Russians. The Canadian armed forces who fought and died against Nazism, they didn't fight for the Russians. So if he's fighting for the Russians, which side is he on? It's not an Allied side. Yeah, he was in the Galicia division. And he gets up and waves, and he's like, "Oh, thank God, people finally love me." And the man actually was a war criminal, murdering a lot of civilians and stuff like that. Galicia division didn't do a lot of fighting. They did a lot of massacring of civilians, Czechs, Slovaks, Jews, um, until they had the bad luck to run into a Soviet tank army, and the Galicia division was reduced from 13,000 to 2,000 and got destroyed. Um, but yeah, so it was a big scandal. But the thing that's so odd about it is it's happened twice. This guy has gotten up and done that. Many years ago, he did it again, and it happened. When you are some special guest and you're going to stand up and say something in public with the world watching and your leaders watching and a foreign leader watching, in Canada as much as here in the United States, you get reviewed, you get interrogated, you get to find out who this guy really is. So they knew exactly what they had there up in that balcony being thanked. They had a war criminal that the Canadians protected because most of his war crimes were against Eastern Europeans and Russians. in the Cold War days. So they knew. They did it twice. So that's when I realized that Canada has also to work on its Nazi problem.
Hmm.
But we have our problems down here. I'm not judging Canada for it. I mean, God knows we've got our problems with fascists and people here too. So we can work together.
Well, I mean, I was from Detroit, but
Ah,
when I think of Canada, I'm always thinking of maple syrup, hockey, you know, cold weather. But as I get older,
Molson's beer.
yeah, beer too. But the thing is that as I get older and I'm more cognizant of geopolitics and international affairs. Um, there's definitely a strange feeling that is coming out of Davos this year,
Mm,
and that is that this whole new world order is almost getting smashed up.
yeah.
So the
The
question
BRICS
is,
is
what
smashing.
exactly does it mean? you
Well, the
know?
BRICS is doing it. The BRICS is the new world order. These people are a bunch of globalists who think they can do a one government rule and dictate over the human race. They're just trying another variation of Gross Deutschland. It's Gross Erdeland. If we use the ancient goddess of the earth, Erda, it's Gross Erdeland.
Mm.
And I used to think that globalism had something to share with the world, but now I'm thinking that the way the world will become a global society is not going to be through globalists and Davos and these dictator types. It's going to be when we shrink the size of our democracies to more localized control because democracy doesn't work in really big populations. It's very difficult. It's a localized form of government. And ultimately, what will happen, and I think the BRICS is a major step towards that. All these countries, they don't want a war anymore. They just want to trade and do peaceful things, bring more wealth to their countries, bring more things. I mean, the Chinese are amazing in that way. Is that they when we come to a country to get it to be an ally, we build a military base. When the Chinese come, they build a speed train. They build infrastructure. And they're very open about it. Says we're investing in you guys so that we can trade back and forth. And the trade is not dominating like here. I mean, we weaponize everything that we trade about as a domination thing. It's kind of an empire without the obvious Imperial British Army and the Union Jack flying over it. We we do the bank jack. We do. I mean, we do what happened to me, what happened to my master when he was being kicked out of 21 countries by the CIA, flying after each country when he was kicked out of America. And uh, I saw in Uruguay, it looked like he was going to actually, Uruguayans were embracing us, and it looked like we were going to end up with our commune down in South America in Uruguay. And I was thinking, well, I'm going to have to learn Spanish because we're going to live in Spanish world now. And uh, and he was just a few steps from getting a permanent guest visa. And then the CIA plane finally found us. And then the guy who was our go-between with Sanguinetti, who was the president at that time, in tears, said to Osho and people who were there in Puente del Este, had this two houses that were merged into one, Puente del Este, East Point. And he said, the Americans have come in. They've basically say, if you don't get the Bhagwan out of here, we will demand that you pay up your debts for the investments now. And it's interesting when I heard that story, and that's why he flew out, went to Jamaica next after that. Eventually went back to India, and then the CIA tried to prevent me and other people, thousands of disciples, from getting past customs in India. They they tried to silence him, and then they tried to keep us away from our teacher. Imagine if you did that to the disciples of Jesus or the chelas of Buddha. Well, it was happening. And um, so I'm watching with
Under Reagan.
house.
This is
My
under
mom.
Reagan's administration.
Yeah, this be 1986. So I'm sitting with my mom and we're watching TV in Seattle, and then suddenly there's this whole thing going on where, oh, a Ronald Reagan, he's shaking hands with Sanguinetti. A few days later, Sanguinetti was up and having a visit in the Oval Office all by his lonesome with Ronnie. And they're shaking, and he says, yes, and this is President Sanguinetti, and we've decided to postpone the payments of this money that his country needs, and we're actually going to give him more money because we love Uruguay. Well, that was the payoff. So I look over to my mom. She looks over at me. We look at each other and start cracking up. We said, "So this is what it was." We saw the other side of it. My people saw or witness to the other side of this. So that's how American empire works. It works. It's in clever in a way. It's invisible. It's the invisible empire. But what's going to happen is this empire is falling, and the 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 future is really now with the global majority. One of other Osho prophecies that came true is that the world is moving from east-west axis to north-south, and it's beginning now. And the global south, the majority of the human race with Asia, um, are not going to buy our bonds anymore. Um, the US dollar is going to have to devalue itself, and Americans have to return to be responsible, pay-as-you-go Americans. We used to be that way before World War II and the Cold War, till we got addicted to military industrial complex industries. Well, that's all going now. And so America's going to have to use the US dollar like everybody else uses their currencies and pay as you go. Not we've made all this wealth on the burden of others gobbling up through our dollar our excess deficit spending. Well, now nobody's using our dollar anymore, and soon very few will be using it because it's just too damn toxic and manipulative. Now, United States, Trump could end this brain fart in 1 second if he did an unpredictable left turn as he can, as this Gemini with Uranus and his sun in Gemini. And with his true north also in the conjunction, it would be a lucky move because he's very lucky. He might even survive his own disasters because he has incredible luck. It doesn't matter what his mental health is or not. He has incredible luck. So he may fall into that space lucky. I don't know. But um, he's he could just right now say all sanctions gone. The US dollar is open again. And and we're not going to put any strings attached on it. That's not helping the world, and it's not helping us. And the other thing he could do is say, we've spent 50 years dismantling our industrial base. Now the future is industrial jobs, you know, and just start to encourage that. And it's going to take a minimum of a quarter century to get us somewhat back on our feet again. Russia went through this. There's somebody to watch about this. Their industry crashed and was then gobbled up by carpetbaggers, mostly American carpetbaggers, in the 1990s. They had to build from scratch. And about just before this war started, the Russian economy was finally coming out of that. And now they're booming. And they have an industrial base. If they got to go to war, they can make it, the stuff. If they got to go to peace, they can make it. Just like we used to be. What's left of our industrial base? The other thing that has to happen is sit down on the financial economy. That economy is BS. It doesn't make anything. It doesn't give us things that last, that our children can have and their children's children. It's just a handful of rich speculators in a casino making, not making anything, but just profiting off this. Now, the other thing that could happen too, Robert Barnes, I'm going to write some things about what I heard Robert Barnes said. A great source of mine, comes on the Duran a lot. He's also a good insider, objective insider about what's going on in the cabinet. He's got connections and friendships with a lot of those people. He's a close friend of the vice president. And and so um, I never thought of this, but we could literally, this whole idea that the 10% that has the money are going to keep the economy going up. It's just like what's going on in Las Vegas. They believe the high rollers, they've got this brain fart in their head that if we just uh, serve the high rollers and stop giving the free dinners and lower prices for shows and stuff to working class people that used to be your mainstay, your one-armed bandit guys. No, we're only going to deal with high rollers, and that's how we'll finance all this and make even more money, and we won't have to work so hard. And, well, it's Las Vegas is becoming a ghost town. It's destroying Las Vegas. And in the same stupid way, this idea that the 10% that have most of the wealth on this, how many yachts can a handful of trillionaires buy to keep this economy afloat? But you know what you can do, and what Robert Barnes said, is you could actually the way the money flows goes, you could actually end property taxes, and you could actually uh, give a lot of working people could have next to no taxes to pay and still deal with the higher echelons and stuff, making lots of money. Okay, Wall Street, you want to make the money, we're going to take 30%. And then that volume of money, the vast majority of American people will keep the money they earn. And what do people do when they keep the money they earn and their nest egg grows and all? They buy things. The thing that made this country great economically was that the whole population was buying, was customers were, and that made more businesses, and then that made more businesses for businesses, and so it goes. So a tax jubilee where you don't even have to pay taxes at a certain level of your income, you can keep whatever you earn. And still, there's other ways. So I'm going to study what he's saying deeper so that I can talk about those other ways. There's still other ways that um, you can pay the taxes and pay the bills. You don't have to. Frankly, he said that technically what the Joe Schmo and Mrs. Joe Schmo America are getting are giving to the government. It's not that much. It would not be missed. And it would be so much better. The burden of debts and inflation stuff would go down. People would have more currency to pour into the real economy, not the BS economy, which is trapping all the money, going nowhere fast, or sitting there, not being invested. I mean, if these Wall Street people would invest in real factories, real jobs, then that would help us too. I would give them incentives to do that, or give them punishments if they don't. Well, if you don't do that, we're going to take a lot of your funny money. But if you
Well, I
took
mean,
the,
Trump kind of brought this up with the defense industry. He
hmm,
was basically saying you're going too slow. We need to ramp up our manufacturing, and what the executives are doing is they're buying back stock,
yeah,
using the cash flow, buying back stock, having stock options for the
yeah,
executives,
yeah.
and paying higher dividends instead of
The
investing in more equipment and
well, and
plants.
what this war has shown in Ukraine is here what we're going to go up to another $500 billion and have and the same Trump saying $1.5 trillion to build a new American army and all that. You could reduce this down to 300 million, but get all the graft out, all the stock options, all that stuff, because all these rich guys are doing with the military industrial complex is taking the lion's share of that money, and they might as well be politicians in Ukraine. They are grabbing it, they are making themselves rich off of it. And if you look at the kind of hardware that really got a test in this Ukrainian war, and soon, maybe minutes from now or days, you're going to see how defunct the Navy is, how those rust buckets are ready to go down without a missile. You're going to see to what extent we have nothing but a graph, mortally wounded military base. It can't produce because none of that money's gone in there. So the first thing I would do is sit all those billionaires down and said, because they're the oligarchs that are as evil as the oligarchs that were running Russia and we were helping them. And it was Vladimir Putin that over 20 years got rid of them all. He said, you can still keep your money, but stay out of politics.
Mm.
Stay out of the people's business. And the ones that didn't, he put them in jail and exiled them out, or they got out. And then a lot of them are moping in Britain. So those oligarchs are a bunch of thieves. And we've got a bunch of thieves in billionaire mansions circling the entire District of Columbia. Those people should be put on notice. Okay, from this point, you got your money this way, but from now on, you're going to be a patriot to this country. You're going to put most of that money and research and employment and do that to make our defenses better, or you're in jail because you are you're no better than a Ukrainian corrupt official. Zelensky, I hear now has hid $1 billion
Billion
in several banks. Yeah, he's up to 1 billion. I remember when he started at
for
400.
himself.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you, the people that have been so screwed in this war are the Ukrainian people. They don't even know to what extent they literally are living up to Lindsey Graham's openly expressed wish. Well, yeah, we'll fight the Russians to the last Ukrainian if we need to. He actually says this in public, and he doesn't even think that. So we're just your tool. We're meat. And America doesn't love Ukraine. I think the American government is at least you're just a tool. You've been completely bamboozled. And worse, your people, the Ukraine is losing millions, crippled and wounded in this war. The Russians are not,
I
because
think that Zelensky would have a chance in fair elections to be reelected.
no, in fact, they did a poll. And I have the poll up in my last set of articles. And no, Zelensky would not win anything. He'd probably go down as bad as I mean, his popularity, lack of popularity is in the 80 percentiles, I think. But what was interesting was that General Zaluzhny would win over Budanov, who is actually the lady in waiting to be the next president. And he is he's a CIA man. He's trained by the CIA. He's running the SBU, which is or the DIR, I think, DUR or GUR, which is, or as they say in Ukrainian, HUR. That is the military intelligence, and he's replaced the guy who was the minister of the presidential offices, which is another name for the vice president. So he's been picked as the vice president by the CIA's boy, and
Hmm.
he's going to be the next Russian president, Ukrainian president. And then if Zelensky can get out, I mean, fortunately, his family is in one of his big sprawling mansions in the United Kingdom. So his kids and his family have already left. He's all alone there. So at least he thought ahead and saved his family. But man, he now Zelensky, in my article, I showed you something you'll never see on mainstream news in England or Europe or in the United States. And it's a true picture before when he was fired as the Russian general and was going off to his exile as the ambassador who can't speak English in Britain. Um, this the commander, the current commander of the right sector National Socialist militia. That's the red and black flag guys. And he was giving him a little iron cross with the Ukrainian symbol in the center of the iron cross, but it looks just like a German iron cross except for that. So he's showing it. And behind him is a black and white painting of Stefan Bandera, the founding George Washington of Ukrainian Nazism. And to the right of him is the red and black flag of right sector, Pratley sector, which are the people that launched the coup with U.S. backing, the very bloody coup, the fascism takeover Ukraine back in 2014. And so, and he's looking with those kind of snake-like eyes. He looks a lot like Goering. He might be his reincarnation. I don't know. He's just looking and he's just saying, yeah. His face is like saying, yeah, I'm with them.
Mm.
He could be the next president, or maybe he'll take a stint as commanding general and then fulfill a prophecy that he made about himself. That he reflected. He said, God, I often am haunted by thinking about the commander of the Finnish forces in the Winter War, 1939, 1940, Mannerheim. And I often think, I wonder with this war, and he was saying this early on, it's one of the reasons why he started to say, hey, we're losing this war in 2023. And he said, I'd hate to have to speak to my soldiers and tell them that what Mannerheim had to when the Soviets beat them. And I'm thinking, there's a chance he might have to make that speech. He might be having a presentiment about it because he might become, after Sirski is dumped, who's called the butcher by most Ukrainians. When he can't take a defensive position, he just throws more people to get killed on it. That seems the only way he works. Um, so yeah, so lots of things happening.
So we're at that time of the show where we'll have to wrap it up. But before we do, I want to remind the audience in the description we have links. So please click the link. It'll take you to John's website. Sign up for the periodical, and if you'd like, also sign up for a reading. We talked about the readings through the broadcast, but if you want to talk about the periodical for
Well,
those
the periodical, the periodical, can't speak today.
periodical.
Periodical. I should have to do a Gilbert and Sullivan patter to get my voice back. Why without adoration, met with fascination to indulge in my lamentation, no occasion do I miss. But anyway, uh, so yes, well, the Hogue Prophecy Report is in this new year. It's going to be released more frequently, and I will no longer be doing my epic novel size article waves. I will be applying that prodigious work to new books. Uh, so for people who love the long haul of my work, and a lot of my readers do, you're going to have a lot of books to read from now on. But what I do now is one or two articles frequently. I can't tell you when yet because I'm still learning how to do this and keep all my other ring circuses going. But I just released one. It was, there'll be about 16,000 words, 18,000 words maximum, but I'm going to try to reduce that so that I can bring them out more frequently. I mean, here's one thing it could happen. maybe I'm only hours away or days away from launching a overview of Nostradamus's prophecies about Iran and where this is going. So if we're coming to blows, then I will be working next week on one article that will be a nice overview of what I was writing about in Nostradamus, the War with Iran. And hopefully I won't need to do that, but I have a feeling I will be. And so more frequent there. And so when you go to hoagprophecy.com, you'll see free samples of all of my articles. And you will also see a place where you can join up. Uh, and $60 for a to pay online to get a subscription for 12 months. That's only $5 a month. Not a lot of money. Um, but you can also be an automatic payer and subscribe. You go, there's this link I'll give you, and it'll take you to a page which has kind of a pink background. With in the upper corner, you see donate here, and you click on that button, and it will take you to PayPal, where your options will be easily there for you to take. You know, I prefer that you do it with your credit card rather than do. I don't have a PayPal account for myself privately. I only have a page for my. So if you donate and say, "Hey, get it this way," just use your credit card if you can to get that. And it's all very protected, well and fine. And that's that you will then be receiving a couple times a month, some months three times, some months one. It really, but you will get a lot of fully illustrated PDF files, which I attach to your email that you want me to use, or the email you use to go to PayPal to purchase your subscription. And then you'll get the Hogue Prophecy Report.
All right. So individuals, the ones that are watching, please click the link in the description and that will go to John's website. Please sign up and help support John's work. He puts in a lot of effort. It's very detailed information, so please help support.
And thank you for the support.
Yep. Well, we had a pretty good, good showing today. So everyone, thank you for typing in and chatting and listening in on X Spaces. We greatly appreciate it. And we're going to do this again in about 2 weeks or so. So, John, you tell everybody goodbye and have a good night.
Goodbye, everybody. 2 weeks from now, it'll be a whole new world.
Yeah, maybe, hopefully, we don't glow in the dark.
Well, if we glow in the dark, we'll glow in the dark dancing.
Maybe. So thank you everybody for watching, and I will also be replaying this on the different channels if you want to watch the uh, the premieres, and share the links and ask your social media to follow us so we can grow the audience. Thank you
And
for
if you haven't clicked that button, the like button, click it now.
yes,
Thank you.
please click the like button. So thank you for listening and have a nice day.